Hey guys, it's Dan here, and I wanted to talk to you about data types. If you're an engineer and you're familiar with Python and JavaScript data types, this is probably not going to be very interesting for you. This is for those of you like me who know maybe enough to be dangerous, but aren't an engineer by trade, and data types may be a new concept to you. But I want to talk to you about what they are, why they're important, and the data types that we use in Domo. So you can see I've got a workflow pulled up here called page cleanup. And you can see I've got a variety of variables added here. You'll notice whenever you go to leverage a function, the parameters have a data type associated with them, both the inputs and the outputs. And it will only let you map parameters that match the same data type, right? I see here all of my strings are available. I've got ABC there, which is the sign for a string. Even though I've got all of these other types of variables available, those can't be mapped here because this function wants a string. So what you need to keep in mind is that the underlying code is looking for a particular data type, and it's written in such a way that it will only work with that data type, which is why they're so important. And without that understanding, it can be a little bit frustrating and confusing. So the types that you see here, a lot of them are self-explanatory, but I wanted to walk through a couple. Text, that's just a string, right? It's alphanumeric characters. Now, a number, like you could have a string that is all numbers, right? 9999, for example, that can be a string, but it needs to be stored as a string. A number can only be numbers, can't have any letters in it, and frankly, can't even have any decimals in it. It's literally just numbers, is for that data type number. Now, if you do have a fractional number, right, a number with a decimal, the data type there would be decimal. Essentially, the functions are written in such a way that it can handle that period being there as part of the number. As silly as that seems, that's an important thing that the code needs to account for. Booleans are true or false. They evaluate to either true or false. So it provides a single binary response. It's one of those two things. It's true or it's false. Date, pretty straightforward, as is time and date time. Date time would be if you have them together, right? Like right now, it is October 6th, 2023, so that would be my date. The time is 1:39 p.m., so that would be my time. My date time would be October 6th, 2023 at 1:39 p.m., right? So if you have that data in one field, then that would be a date time. Duration is something that we use inside of the workflow. It's used for things like timers and whatnot, and you can associate, it can be seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, quarters, years, those types of things. Now, list and object are the two that take me a little bit longer to get my head around. So a list has a data type associated with it, right? So what that means is that a list is essentially multiple values, right? If you think about names or something, right? Dan, Megan, Owen, Oliver. Those are all text or strings, but I got a list of them, right? So you can have a list of all of the different data types. Lists are important to use when you might be receiving more than one value, right? And there's lots of different cases where you can do that. Well, I'll show you one here in just a moment. And then objects can contain lots of different things. And if you Google JavaScript data types or Python data types, right, those are the two things that we support in Code Engine. You can see the data types go very deep. But an object essentially contains information inside of it. And they can be open objects, which if I add a variable here, let's do it just for fun, if I add an object, we'll call it sample1. If I could type. You see we've got our object here, sample1, and the box is transparent, right? Or it's white. And that's because that object is undefined. We haven't told it what children or what parameters are going to live inside of that object. It can contain anything, including different data types, right? If I edit this object and I add a child, we'll call it sample2, and we'll say that is going to be text. And let's add even another one just for good measure. We'll add sample3, and we'll say that that's a number. Now you'll notice a couple of things. Our variable here is now black. It's not colored anymore because it's a defined object. We know that that object is going to contain a string that is sample2, and it's going to contain a number which is sample3. Now you can see that there's sample1 dot sample2. That probably wasn't the most straightforward naming convention, but sample1 is the object and sample2 is the child inside of that object. Now there are a few reasons why you want to keep your objects defined or undefined. One benefit to having a defined object like this is it is now available to be chosen as a string, right? You can see that sample1.sample2, that's a text field inside of an object. That is available for me to reference as a parameter, right? So that's one big benefit. One challenge with it is you're locked into that. You got to make sure that your data structure supports that. So I want to look in a practical example for you guys at a couple of things here. I'm going to query a data set here. This is an thing that you'll often find when we use a query data set function in Domo. We don't get back a table like we would expect, like we would from a data flow. When we query a data set here, and it looks like I've got a not found there. Sorry about that. Don't know what happened. Apparently, I've got a bad data set ID, but I get back a list of objects. Let's try this one more time. I don't know how much troubleshooting I want to do during the video here. Yeah, it's bad request. So yeah, the past output type was incorrect. So it's a data type issue. Either way, it gets back a list of objects. And you'll see that I've got some functions in here where I'm converting a number to text, right? We have text utilities and general utilities packages to allow you to set data types and adjust data types. Because in this case, I had a variable, list length, it was a number, and I wanted to insert it into a string so that it could be used inside of an email body, and so I needed to convert that number to text. One other thing I want to hit on, you'll encounter this with your lists and with your objects. So two things I want to show. You will have, you'll need to reach into those lists and you'll need to grab items out of that list, right? In this case, I have a list of objects and I want to reach into it and get a singular object back, right? I want to do something with that one object. We got a separate video on lists, but I want to do something with that one object. And so I want to take my list of objects and I want to extract a singular object from that list. And this is how I'll do that. Now, one thing to keep in mind, the index position uses zero-based counting. If that's a new concept to you, it's a little bit tricky, but essentially the first item in the list is item 0. The second item in the list is item 1, so on and so forth, right? So the first, if you want to grab the first item from that list, you want to grab the item at index position 0. Another thing is if you want to reach into an object and you want to get a property out of that object, we've got functions to do that as well. So in this case, I've got an object. I want to grab the object ID property, and I want to store that as a variable here. So lists and objects oftentimes are used as a list or as an object, but a lot of times you need to break that list down to singular values or extract properties from inside of that object. We do have functions, like I said, available for that in our general utilities and our text utilities. I hope that was helpful. If you've got any questions, ask us in the community. We do have some information on this in the workflows overview content in Domo support, which you can find by clicking on the, we'll go ahead and bail on our changes there. You can find that by clicking on the Learn More button here. So there is some documentation there. But come find us in the community. Let us know if you got any questions. Hopefully this was helpful. Excited to see what you get built.